Welcome to the Thing About Witch Hunts. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack Skellington.
So Sarah, quick question. If you saw a very tall man with no face watching you from the edge of the woods, would you run toward him or away from him?
I've got a bunch of questions for him, so I am going to run towards him.
Well, of course you are.
Does he have tentacles?
Oh, he's got tentacles, all right.
I have questions. I gotta go find him.
It looks like you have company.
I hope so.
So we're looking at monsters this month because witches are monsters, and we want to find answers to questions about monsters. What is a monster? Why do we need monsters? And why do we treat humans as monsters? What does that do for us?
I have questions for all those monsters too.
Today, we're joined by returning guests, fellow podcasters Sean and Carrie of the amazing podcast Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie, to talk about the internet's most infamous creation.
We're talking Slender Man, the faceless boogeyman born in the digital age.
From creepypasta legend to real world nightmare, we're exploring how folklore goes viral.
And we end up talking about Salem because, of course, we do.
We always find our way back to the witch trials.
For podcasters who love things that go bump in the night.
So grab your jack-o'-lantern and keep it close.
Don't wander off the path. Keep the porch light on and get cozy for the spooky one.
Let's get started.
He's skeptical, she's spooky. Together they explore the unknown, unsolved, unbelievable, and just plain weird on their podcast, Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie. With their passion for history and the truth, they bring their different perspectives to today's episode team up. It's about to get scary with Sean and Carrie and Josh and Sarah. Welcome back to the podcast, Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. We are getting back in the podcast saddle after a long absence. So thank you so much for helping us do that.
Absolutely. We're really looking forward to talking to you guys again.
And of course, as always, lowering the usually very high level of discourse on this show. Just a touch, just a touch.
Keeping it lighter.
Yeah.
And thank you for having us during the most Ain't It Scary time of year, during spooky season, just as we roll into October here.
Yeah, I was so excited when we connected and it was a go. So thanks for helping us roll out some fun Halloween talk.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with that, I mean, for Halloween, we always, just traditionally, it just sort of happened. We always end up talking about urban legends. It's such a spooky campfire time of year. And more over the years, I particularly have been really fascinated with how folklore evolves over time and how folklore exists in our world nowadays. And usually that's wrapped up in scary stories. And I think with both of our podcasts, we have kind of this mutual interest in the idea of monsters, not necessarily crazy creatures from the abyss, but
for us, sometimes it's crazy creatures.
Sometimes, or Jeff the talking mongoose. But really, society's definition of a monster, what makes a monster, if those defined by society at large really are monstrous, if it's their actions that define that. And oftentimes urban legends really explore these, where fictional and real monsters sort of coexist. And that's pretty appropriate for the time of year, I think.
I'm so fascinated with how the stories are told.
And how they evolve, too. We thought it would be interesting today to talk about Slender Man in particular. I think your audience will be familiar with the concept of Slender Man. They might even see a few Easter eggs in one of these screens. I don't know. Slender Man maybe
lurking.
maybe lurking. But that is a story that has evolved from basically a post on an image board to something that eventually jumped in a very scary way into real life and into the news.
Yeah. It's sort of a case study on internet folklore, which is kind of one of the most popular kinds of new age folklore nowadays, is because like how is everyone connected? Usually back in the day it was word of mouth or books and things like that, but now with the internet things move so quickly and you can connect to so many people across such a vast space that these stories really spread and evolve and take on minds of their own, even more than the urban legends we grew up whispering at summer camp.
Yeah, I was thinking about, hoping to see Bloody Mary in the mirror, but not really wanting to. But you hope, will that image appear? Will the image appear? And then, of course, there were not computers for me to go look at scary images yet at that age, when I was that age, 100 years ago.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about those like urban legends that we grew up with and those that maybe younger people are growing up with now that are really internet based is that they still kind of function the same way, a lot of them. The ones that really stick, the ones that really are evocative and really grab people, they're often cautionary tales. They're sort of these like heightened warnings of horrific possibilities lying around every corner. So, we grew up hearing stuff like the man with the hook for a hand. The teenagers are on Lover's Lane and they're necking in the car and then blah, blah, blah. And a, murderer has escaped an asylum and kills one of them and leaves a hook in the car. And it's the guy with the hook for a hand. Now, the warning here is obviously like, don't be kissing. Don't be kissing. But it is kind of influenced by real life too. There was a real life crime that still hasn't been solved, the Texarkana Moonlight murders. And those happened to teenagers on lovers' lanes. They were killed or victimized, and no one ever found who did it. So, that's not something that happened in every town. Like every town had the urban legend of like, did you hear about the escaped convict that killed those kids? But, this cautionary tale sort of melded with a real life crime and sort of, again, took on a life of its own. But it took a lot longer, to snowball back in the day. The Texarkana Moonlight murders were in the 40s. And we were hearing those iterations of the legends in like the 70s, 80s, 90s. And so, it kind of took a long time to spread and sort of define its classic story structure. But with the internet, things are created and they spread immediately. If they really hit, they become viral, everyone knows about it eventually.
I also feel like for parents, the internet is a fear or a danger.
Yes.
And so one angle of Slender Man to me is a modern folklore story to parents of the dangers of your child. What are they looking at on the internet?
And I mean, in a way, with the crime that happened, it kind of makes sense. Obviously, this like the Lover's Lane murders is a very heightened example. This is a very specific example. These are the Slender Man stabbings. Like there's just this one stabbing. But parents can look at that and think like, I knew the internet was a bad place. They create these monsters and the kids are enraptured by them.
Or maybe, do you remember Momo, the
Yes.
image that was supposedly making kids like unalive themselves?
Yes. Yeah. There are things like that all over the place. And I mean, Sean worked in the news and I feel like you guys covered, this is the new internet thing.
Oh,
like
Momo. We did cover Momo.
Yeah, like on the local news, because parents were probably calling in being like, hey, what's going on? I heard that this is happening to everyone. And just like an urban legend, just like with the Lover's Lane murders or Slender Man, like this is a very centralized situation of influence in real life, but people kind of take it and run with it. So these internet-based urban legends, they're called creepypasta. And that's kind of from the term copypasta, which was like those emails that you'd get back in the day that was like, copy this and then send it to 10 friends or you'll have bad luck or whatever. So creepypasta was sort of the internet horror story version of that.
The word creepypasta, I was reviewing the notes on the Slender Man crime that we'll get to in a minute, no spoilers. And it struck me that the word creepypasta was a big part of these girls' vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like they're talking, we'll get into it, but they're talking about going to a mansion in the woods where all of the creepypastas live.
Yeah, like the creepypastas, as in like they're the universal monsters or something.
Yeah, the shared universe, the shared cinematic universe of the creepypastas.
So yeah, it's pretty fascinating how those things take on a life of their own. And I'm curious how much you guys knew about Slender Man, like when it first started becoming popular, and then did the crime really register with you guys as well?
I don't think I knew about it until the crime. I wasn't in the creepypasta world, so it was a new exposure for me to see that. And since then, I like the creepypastas, but I don't like taking them and turning them into real life.
Yeah,
For sure. Agree to agree on that one.
I was aware of creepypasta, but I wasn't aware of Slender Man. And my niece was 12 when things happened. And I remember, I think probably the first thing Aunt Sarah said was, you know what's fantasy and what's not fantasy, right? Because it was so, I think that was one of the real shocking things is like what is actually in our world, what is real in our world. But I was so fascinated because of how his image, just the history of him, and I know you might talk about that a little bit, but how he just wasn't thought of, and then he was presented, and then the stories, they just ran with the stories. Yeah.
The visual hasn't even evolved that much in those first two something
didn't
awful
have to.
posts.
It was so
it's there. It's a
evocative,
really
yeah.
good creature design. Well, it's very Men in Black. We did one of our last runs of episodes before we departed for our hiatus was Hot Moth Summer, and we talked about we were talking about the Mothman, and we talked about the Men in Black a lot. There is a Slender Man.
Sing it. I've heard you sing it.
Will Smith.
It's been so long. I forgot which I was going to bust into Will Smith's Miami. And I was like, I don't know why we're doing this, but it's a jam.
Yeah, I mean, there's something really evocative about the imagery, and we'll get to that in a second. And yeah, for me, like 2009 is when this first sort of hit the scene, and I was in early college. I was probably the perfect age to like really appreciate creepypasta culture, and I was on Tumblr, I was on all that fun stuff, but I didn't take it seriously. Like I was old enough to not take it seriously. I was old enough to be like, this is cool. I like reading horror, and it's cool that everyone's kind of contribute. It's almost like fan fiction, it's like this really, like anyone could do it. Anyone could share their work. And I think that's really cool and special.
On the creepypasta subreddit, which I was on from time to time, it was always like, nobody would say that it was fake, but you could tell.
No Sleep was the subreddit.
And No Sleep is great.
That was the conceit, was like, yeah, everyone kind of was role-playing that these stories are real.
If you said you were posting a fake story, it would get taken down. Like the rules of the sub were you had to pretend it was real because people wanted the experience of like,
could it be real?
Like, yeah, it's almost a role play, right? Like clicking through these creepy stories and going, oh, who posted this? But but everybody's participating in a shared, like agreed delusion in that space where they all know it's fake. But maybe a preteen stumbling on the creepypasta wiki doesn't know that.
Yeah. So, they had the girls part of the crime, which again, we'll get to, they were experiencing this story after it had evolved and spread for years. So they didn't have that root of knowing where it came from and knowing it was fictional.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Should we start with something awful?
Well, yeah. So something awful, which is what happened, but also this forum. It was like a message board forum, a really popular thing in the mid 2000s. And what's interesting about this is that, unlike what we were just talking about with like the role play aspect, this forum started a spooky image contest. So it was enter your spooky pictures that you create with like a little spooky story. And everyone knows this is fake because it's like a Photoshop contest. So no one was going into this thinking, oh, this is like a ghost photo that someone really took, or this is someone's real experience. It was like, how legit can they make it seem? Like, how interesting can they make the story? So people started to submit to this back in 2009. It was just, one message thread until pretty early on, one user named Victor Surge, which is not his real name, submitted what would probably become the most memorable because that's what we're talking about today. So he posted 2 photos that he created, and then it was part of the thing that he created them. And one of them was a black and white photo. So like a real picture. He had obviously found it somewhere in, stock imagery. And it's like a group of young teens. They're walking toward the camera. And then there's this strange faceless figure just barely visible behind them, which was, photoshopped in, but like really well done. It's a pretty good edit.
Very tall, long arms.
Yeah, tall, long arms.
Big, strong guy. Tears streaming down his cheeks.
Bald, like faceless. And then below the photo in the post was this quote: "We didn't want to go, we didn't want to kill them, but its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." And then there was a date, 1983, photographer unknown, presumed dead. So it's
I love photographer presumed dead.
Yes.
That's a chef's
dead.
kiss.
Like, you don't even know they're dead. And then there was a second photo. So again, like a real life, probably a stock image, black and white picture of a little girl on these like ladder steps up to a tall slide. And she's smiling at the camera, like almost like her mom's taking the picture. There's a few other kids playing around her in like a park or a playground. And then in the shadows in the far background, there's again this same strange, tall, faceless figure. And he's got these like odd tentacle looking limbs. And he's standing with a few children around him. And the photo bears a seal on the top right saying City of Sterling Library's Local Studies Collection.
He's reaching down to them, right? He might be holding the kids' hands or something with his weird tentacles.
It's kind of like he's beckoning and bringing them in, like, like attracting them to him.
Any listeners or viewers who think they're not familiar with these pictures, if you are familiar with what the Slender Man looks like, you probably have seen one of these because they're like the most but if you just Google or use search engine of your choice,
original Slender Man pictures.
Yeah, original Slender Man pictures. These are the 2 pictures that you'll find.
Yeah. And then on the second, there was this backstory. One of the 2 recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze. So that sounds like something from a Stephen King novel already.
Specifically, it is basically ripped off from it, actually.
Notable for being taken the day which 14 children vanished and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. So this is the first time that the name is used. Deformities cited as film defects by officials. So this seems to be a reference to the weird, creepy guy in the background. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. Actual photograph confiscated as evidence. 1986, photographer Mary Thomas, missing since June 13th, 1986. So he just posted these pictures. He just posted like a sentence, a little paragraph, and then everyone freaked out. People still were submitting their own things, but everyone was kind of like, this Slender Man, like, this story is cool. Like, I love this guy. People were starting to.
I love this.
I love this.
Slaps.
The idea of this monster. People were submitting their own images based on Slender Man from a few days before. So it became its own thing within the message board that like the first people to see this sort of latched on immediately. Like, this is a really effective, creepy story and a really effective monster. Which says a lot about how great of an idea it was.
It has to be, you have to be a really good creature design, a really good creepy idea to start in a post that literally acknowledges that it's fake and then get to a place where there's widespread belief in the thing.
And in the post, you know, everyone was still very much aware that it was fake. They were making their own versions of the story, and that's kind of how it would spread. It came out of the post, people were sharing the post with other people. People started contributing their own versions of the story and their own imagery and their own lore. And it started out slow because, again, this was just, you know, a popular but random message board. It wasn't like a, you know, it's not like how social media is today. But once it really picked up speed, it just kept on going and spreading. So Serge, who his real name is Eric Knudsen, told Vanity Fair that he wanted to formulate something whose motivations can barely be comprehended, which caused unease and terror in a general population. And
it is it, right? It's Pennywise.
Well, that's always going to be the thing for kids. It goes back to that cautionary tale idea that in this case, Slender Man was targeting and victimizing children. And with stranger danger being such a thing and such a influence on urban legends and modern day folklore since, I mean, I guess the 80s was like when it really sort of like became hysteria. It could kind of be that Slender Man became this modern day boogeyman for kids who, you know, like, hey, don't stray too far from the crowd. Don't be too much of an outsider. The monsters could lie in wait and get you.
I was just going to say, it kind of, you know, goes back to the why Hansel and Gretel's so successful. It's the children in danger. They're being lured by somebody. They're being taken by somebody. And we see that with the witch trials. Anytime a child was put in danger, then they go after the danger like intensely. You know, we had the whole satanic panic going on in the 80s too.
Mm-hmm.
The parents were just freaking out about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they never stop. They might latch onto a new fear. So one of the most prevalent ones, as Sean said, is the internet, is what could be connecting to kids, what your kids could be looking at when you don't know.
And that's not an unfounded fear, right? There's a lot of
it's very legitimate
dangers out there.
Yeah. So, you know, it all develops. And what's interesting is that I think the adult perspective is just as involved in the spreading of the story and the formulation of the story as the kids who are consuming it too. Because, you know, like I was a college kid, I guess I was an adult, but like young adults, like they read, you know, spooky stories online because people like reading horror stories, but, you know, they have different perspectives of it. But the adult fears of what could happen to your child, or a child's fear of what could happen to them, it kind of both combined in this story.
It's also unclear to me in that first flurry of Slender Man posts, and you get into this as the lore, the weird Slender Man lore builds up with the Slender Man proxies, and we'll get into that. It's unclear in those first two images whether he's threatening those children or whether he's, I mean, the photographers are presumably adults, right? And they go missing. So is it that Slender Man's weaponizing these children? Is it fear of the children?
Children did go missing at the fire.
Yeah, because they followed Slender Man. But the lady who took the picture, she did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be, he's just going after everyone.
Yeah. He's just having fun. He's just having a good time.
Why do you think it seems to have stayed as the Slender Man and not Slender Men?
What a good question.
I think it kind of, I mean, there are versions of the legend that have multiple of these creatures, or like there's the Slender Woman. Of course, people are going to spin it off, you know, like the Bride of Slender Man. But I think it's just so much creepier, like a Pennywise the Clown, to have like one monster. It's the Michael Myers. You can't get away from him. Like, even he's just one guy, but even so, he's still going to get you. And this guy, particularly this guy, I mean, whatever it is, it can't be reasoned with. He's got no face. Like, you can't talk to him, you know? He is just lying in wait, lurking, like coming to get you. And these original posts, they're not saying how, like, they're just saying these kids vanished. They're not saying, oh, he murders them like this or he does this. His motivations are unclear, and you can't talk to him about his motivations, and you can't there's no humanity, because you can't look him in the eye, or you can't connect on that level. So I think the monstrosity of just this unknowable creature, again, so many things go back to the fear of the unknown, and what's more unknown than a faceless face, just something that looks human but isn't.
I'm trying to figure out how the timeline on this works, but now I'm also thinking of the Silence from Doctor Who, the Doctor Who villain, which are a whole alien race of Slendermans. But I don't know if those episodes came out after the Slender Man legend, probably. But they also could just be Men in Black.
Yeah, again, and the Men in Black, really quick overview, but they're these beings, and there are more than one, so it's unlike the Slender Man, but they're attached to stories of alien abductions and encounters, and these weird guys in suits show up to your house, and they threaten you not to talk, and they look human at first, but then it turns out like their faces are weird and they start acting funny. And again, it's that thing of they seem like us, but they're not quite right.
Yeah,
and that's always going to make, like, that's why the uncanny valley is so frightening, is because we can look at something and go, but the eyes are not quite human, it's not real, and that makes people instinctually very afraid, which is why this was so effective. He has the somewhat of a guise of a guy in a suit, but he's like too lanky, and he's got these tentacles sometimes, and he's got no face. There's things that are off and that are wrong, and that's what makes it frightening.
It's like how movie robots have to look like Johnny Five, or they have to be human actors, because something in between is a little too freaky.
Yeah.
C-3PO's in between.
So, Indiana University folklorist Jeff Tolbert noted, the Slender Man indexes at least two separate intellectual strands, two distinct but related conceptual frameworks. First, Slender Man is a sign of abject fear, the ultimate other, the final evolution of radical alterity. Second, Slender Man subtly references the self-conscious communicative processes that give rise to the tradition itself, and are in fact the reason for its continued existence as an internet icon. Slender Man offers critical commentary on the legend genre by enabling individuals to participate in the creation of a legend through reverse ostension. So basically, there are two really important factors to this professional folklorist as to why this was such an evocative story. And it's because he represents this fear of the other, which is something that you guys talk about all the time, is that, you know, why do people ostracize other people, and why do they turn them into boogeymen? It's because they're afraid of them for some reason. They are other, they are different. And that combines with how the nature of urban legends, and especially internet urban legends, which are just easy to access, like quick to update. You don't have to wait years for things to like get told through word of mouth. It's the participatory nature, and that sort of combined into like this really powerful story that kind of just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed.
And it is the participatory nature that can also be the scary thing, right? When impressionable minds come across this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like anything on the internet, and people are experiencing that now. And this is, you know, even this is like dated in a way, like how this story spread initially. Now it's like TikTok, it's conspiracy theories, but it's, at the end of the day, it's fear of the unknown. I don't understand why this thing happened. I need an explanation. We're making up stories at the end of the day, but they spread because people need to understand what they don't understand.
And people do. There are, since we've been researching the Slender Man, there have been people who believe that there might be Slender Man out there. And I think a lot of them fall into one of two camps. One is children who don't know any better necessarily and think they see adults talking semi-seriously about something on the internet and think that it must be semi-serious or greater. And then you've also got, very interestingly, the school of thought around tulpas, Carrie, or around thought form energy ghosts. If enough people believe in something, then they will, the Secret style, manifest it into being somewhere in the world.
Yeah, it's a very old folkloric. I mean, that's from like old religious and even certain pagan folklore, is creating something out of pure belief. If you believe something hard enough, you can create something. And sometimes that is used for good, to manifest, to your vision board. But sometimes, according to folklore of all different traditions, that can be used to create like your own little monsters to do your bidding. And it's at the intersection of like creation and fantasy and real life fear that the Slender Man story eventually led to what was eventually called the Slender Man stabbing.
That is a spoiler.
Well, it's an attempted murder case. We're going to spoil that up top because there are children involved here. And it's good to know that it's not
It turns
full
out,
murder.
Yeah, it turns out. Okay.
But yeah, there was an attempted murder. So this was in May 2014. So this is only 5 years after this, the first images were posted. So, you know, we were telling the same urban legends for decades, you know, Bloody Mary, the hook hand, you know, aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light, like the college roommate one, like those had decades and decades to percolate. This had spread so far and wide. There were YouTube web series, there were indie video games by this point. I don't know if there had been a film yet, but there have been since then. So in only 5 years, this kind of influenced this major crime. So it just goes to show how the internet has affected how folklore transmits nowadays. But in May 2014, the basic story is two 12-year-old Wisconsin girls stabbed their friend in the woods. She was also their age. They had fully intended to kill her, and it was meant to appease what they believed to be the real Slender Man, to prove themselves to him. And I think it's hard to believe that 12-year-olds, children, could be capable of such horror.
At the same time, it's also hard to believe that children as old as 12, 12 feels a little too, when you're on the face of it, it feels a little too old for this level of falling into a fantasy.
Right.
So it's surprising in both ways.
Yeah. Now it was combined with obvious other issues at play, probably mental illness, which we'll talk about, but it made it so it seemed like to them, this was a reasonable course of action. So the victim, Peyton Leitner, she was originally friends with the perpetrators. These were Morgan Geyser and Anissa Wire. And Morgan and Peyton had been friends since 4th grade. Anissa had been a recent addition to the two at the beginning of 6th grade. So you have this situation where like there's these two best friends forever, and then one girl kind of comes in and she's kind of close with Morgan, but Peyton's not really like into it. But now they're a trio. That's kind of okay. That's our friends now. Morgan was always a little odd. Her mother recalled that she wasn't sad about Bambi's mother dying in Bambi, as an example, but rather she just said, "Run, Bambi, run, get out of there, save yourself."
The save yourself.
And this is like
funny.
very, very young. This is obviously years and years before this stabbing happened. So, you know, she had some things going on. Mm-hmm. And she was the first of them to really become obsessed with Slender Man. She got really into reading creepypasta online. She found the Slender Man story and she just became obsessed with it. She would draw Slender Man. She would look up art, she would engage with the stories, and she sort of influenced Anissa with this obsession. So they fed off of each other. And again, Peyton, who is originally Morgan's best friend, is getting left behind a little bit, and they're becoming like really, really insular and really interested in this thing together. And Peyton's not really interested in it. So she is naturally becoming more and more ostracized the more they become almost addicted to this story and like experiencing more versions of the story and art and videos and all these things.
Well, Carrie, they're working to become proxies to the Slender Man.
Right. Yeah.
Because what these girls believed is that Slender Man lives in a mansion somewhere in the woods, an abandoned mansion, except he lives there with all of the other creepypastas.
That was an idea, yes. And it was specifically in Nicollet National Park, which was in Wisconsin.
Which
That's
happens
convenient.
to be where they are. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
We believe it that he has a mansion. It's right back here in the woods.
Exactly.
Which is like a childlike way to, well, you know, if he has a secret mansion in the woods, it's got to be those woods because those are the only woods I know. You know, there is this childlike fantasy to it all that is interjected with this just horror, which is really interesting to see it meld together. So in 2014, after a slumber party, the three of the girls headed over to a local park. Morgan and Anissa baited Peyton with a game of hide and seek. So again, they're kids. Like this is like they're walking to the park after a slumber party. They're playing hide and seek. They pull her deeper and deeper into the woods. And eventually Morgan got on top of Peyton, told her, "I'm so sorry," and pulled out a knife and began stabbing her. Anissa told Peyton to lay down away from the road and be quiet so she'd lose blood slower. And the girls said that they were going to go get help for her, but just fled. So this poor girl, Peyton, her friends have just attacked her, tried to kill her. She is really badly wounded. And she's hoping that they're going to send help too, because again, there's this childlike aspect of, I can't believe my friends did this. This can't be real.
Yeah, why? I don't know why they did this, but I don't know why they would say they're going to send help if they're not. So hopefully.
Yeah.
Why do you think they wanted to kill her with such a violent act? Or why not just lead her to the mansion with them and then trade her for admittance? Why do you think it is really hard for me to comprehend that violent
Me too.
step that they
I think there's a
initiated?
sacrificial aspect, especially for Morgan, because she was always so close to Peyton. I don't know if Anissa was feeling the same sort of intense sacrifice of it all, but there was a development in the Slender Man lore, which came years later, where you could, and again, there's a zillion different ways this plays out. But
This is a really dark Bloody Mary.
Yes, you could
very bloody.
do terrible acts and act as his proxy. And he would then take you under his wing and trust you. So I think there is a sacrificial aspect of, this is my best friend. What could be better to sacrifice to Slender Man than my best friend?
Oh, it's like Thanos.
It's a bit like Thanos.
So Slender Man wants to be out in the world, or he wants to have impact on the world. He wants to be doing bad stuff and killing people and being a naughty little boy. But sometimes you don't want to go out. Sometimes you want to eat DoorDash. And that's when he has the proxies step in, I think is what's going on.
And then my other question about the proxies is, because I'm always thinking about witchcraft accusations and just our humanity's idea around witches. So these proxies, could somebody be accused of being a proxy? Or did people just want to identify as proxies? Or were they being identified by other fans?
That's fascinating. I don't think I've ever heard of it going that way.
I think most of the time, and I think probably where the lore came from, was people wanting to be part of the story. And in this case, what's interesting is, it seems to me that the two perpetrators, Morgan and Anissa, they were feeding off of each other. They were playing into each other's mental illness and obsession with this story. And also, they were creating this very intense bond that ostracized this other friend. And also, she didn't struggle with mental illness. She was known as being more well adjusted. So what is interesting is that it's the reverse of a lot of witch hunts and witch trial cases where the other is like a socially awkward or doesn't fit in, an outsider. But in this sort of microcosm, this 3-person group, it's the two that are struggling with their mental health, obsessing over this horror monster, and they're ostracizing the girl that is a little bit more well-adjusted, less of an outsider. But to them, she has become the outsider. She is the one that needs to be scapegoated and sacrificed.
And they probably are dealing with some social ostracization outside the group.
Oh, absolutely. Especially Morgan. Yeah. They both really struggled with friendships in school. Peyton and Morgan, it seemed like Peyton was making other friends and able to be social and things like that. And maybe Morgan saw that and was very jealous of that as well, because these were her only friends.
Now, didn't Anissa tell Morgan, or the other way around, maybe that Slender Man would kill their parents? So there's also like there's a carrot and a stick angle. Like, you can come live in the mansion with me and Michael Myers or whatever, or I'll kill your parents.
Yeah. So to get to that in a second,
yes.
The girls do flee. They go to try and find Slender Man in the woods, in his Slender Mansion.
Is that what they called it?
It's in my mind is that, but I don't know if that's what they called it. But colloquially, I think people are like the Slender Mansion.
It's right there.
So they run. Now, Peyton was miraculously found alive by like a biker, just like a passing person. She was rushed to the hospital, and Morgan and Anissa were discovered walking by the highway and detained for questioning. So again, there's this really childlike aspect of like, there's not really a plan here. How are you going to get into the deep woods of this national park, which I'm sure is massive to 2 kids who don't know where they're going? They're just wandering by the highway. They just figured Slender Man would swoop in and be like, this way, you know? But they were able to do such a horrific act that is world altering, that almost ended a person's life, but there's no real plan. And that is really childlike, but then wrapped up in all of this horror. And so questioning, Morgan said that they had to do what they did because Anissa had told her that Slender Man would kill their families.
So that was from The Stand.
You know, what struck me watching the HBO documentary, they talked about Morgan and Anissa planning this for like 6 months to like work out the details of this plan. But then they kind of changed some of the elements towards the end. Like, they want to kill her at night while she's sleeping at first, but then they go with this other plan. And
this was like the third option. I think they tried to do something in the bathroom at the park, and I don't know if Anissa couldn't go through with it, so they kept on putting it off. Again, it's the child like, oh, we'll figure it out. It's fun to, as a kid, to like fixate on something and like make a little plan or whatever. And I used to do that with like murder mystery parties. Like, that was my thing when I was in high school or whatever. Like, we would plan and we would create the characters and everything, and that was so fun, but it was fake. And I knew it was fake and it was just for fun. But they were using this as their entertainment as well, because it was their entertainment. Reading creepypasta was their entertainment, and fixating on it and obsessing on these stories. And then they just brought it into their lives.
No,
I was just thinking about attacking her was power. Like, how do children look at that? Like, look for power. Did they feel like they were taking some power? Like, having power to hurt their friend, to serve Slender Man? So then are they like, even they're adjusting his power because they're not going to be victims of his.
I think that was part of it, is that Morgan, especially, who was the one who did the stabbing, she had a flat affect too. I don't think it seemed like it affected her a ton, at least initially. And I think part of it was she was wrapped up in this fantasy that she's just doing this for this monster. She's just, in a way, part of this monster. She's his right hand doing this action for him. And I think it's a way to remove yourself as well. It's like, well, I'm only doing this for such and such. And for a child, it might be a little easier to pull those things apart and be like, this isn't me. Because if you're already wrapped up in this fantasy, it's not so hard to remove the blame from yourself. So I think she probably did feel power, but she didn't feel like she was doing it just for herself or doing it to get one over on Peyton. She was doing it to go be with Slender Man. That's what they wanted at the end of the day.
Maybe a power dynamic was at play, but they weren't consciously thinking about it super hard.
Yeah, I think with what we talked about, how they had been othering her in their 3-person friendship, I think that was really the expression of it, was this is going to be the victim because she is the most unlike the two of us. Like the two of us get it. We're a little more weird. We're obsessed with this story, and she's not like us. And the power there is victimizing her. It's like they felt powerful to make the decision, to make her the victim, to choose her as the sacrifice. But I don't know if they thought of it as necessarily even against her, you know?
Yeah.
It's interesting because it seems like it was just very much like, this is what we have to do to meet Slender Man.
Yeah, if one of them fully got cold feet and the other one said, I'm so sorry, they weren't like excited. They weren't up in an angry bloodlust or excited to get to the stabbing.
And they seemed both interested in Slender Man and also fearful. Morgan said that, Anissa said that he would kill their families. And she also said that she had been seeing him in her dreams, which I'm sure was frightening for a child. And Anissa said, from what the creepypasta wiki said, he targets children most. So I was really scared knowing Slender Man could easily kill my whole family in 3 seconds.
But here's where I get stuck on that word creepypasta again, because to me, but maybe this is the difference of being an adult, but to me, or maybe this is a difference of mental illness for that matter, but for me, the word creepypasta means that the stuff's fake. That's an attending like mental tag on the word creepypasta.
To them, it might have just been a genre, true crime, like horror. It was just the genre that they were looking at.
Yeah.
But I think they really played into each other's fears so much so that, you know, they started believing it through the power of just influencing each other back and forth, obsessing about this thing, fixating on it, and then fixating on this plan. It became more and more real because you had someone else telling you that they believed it and they thought the same things as you. So it's how a conspiracy theory spreads. It's, well, if someone else believes the same thing, I can't be crazy because there's something here. It's really interesting because, again, they're kids. So it's seeing it through that lens is very different than seeing it through an adult lens. And we talked about the Satanic Panic. We talked about Pizzagate and all that stuff. And those are very adult hysterias based in fears, and just like this.
Fears about children.
And some of them resulted in crimes or accusations leveled at people.
McMartin Preschool.
Yeah, McMartin Preschool, like very baseless sort of situations at the end of the day that was legally found. And those were the adult cases. So it's interesting that this is like, a microcosm of that. And Morgan was the one that really went with the proxy thing. She was the one that told Anissa, like, this is what we do to be proxies for him and go meet him. It was her that said that they should kill Peyton because they have to prove themselves to him. So it makes sense that she's the one, first of all, she's the one doing the stabbing, but she's the one making this choice because she was the one who was the closest to Peyton. So maybe she also felt the most jealous of her being more integrated in their young society. She might have felt left behind by her in some senses and betrayed by her. And she figured, I have this new friend. I need to prove myself to this new friend as well. We both believe the same thing. So let's cut out this other person that is not part of our group anymore.
Yeah. It just would have been better if they just got into like Ed Sheeran or
Well,
something.
sure.
Ed Sheeran will never demand to stab your friend in the woods.
And if he does, that's not good.
If you play 'em backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Backmasked Ed Sheeran. Can I have some tea?
That's a very pleasant bath.
So after the interrogation, the girls were arrested for first-degree attempted homicide. The trial began September 2017, so this is a few years later. Morgan was charged with attempted first-degree homicide because she was the one who perpetrated the stabbing, and Anissa with attempted second-degree. Now, because of a Get Tough on Crime initiative in Wisconsin, they were required to be tried as adults. They were not even teenagers during the stabbing, and they still were like
14 or 15.
14 or 15, but they were being tried as adults for attempted murder. And they were both facing life in prison if found guilty. So this kind of, it wasn't a whim, right? There was planning that went into it, but they didn't grasp the seriousness of it for a variety of reasons. But again, they were 12. Like, you're going through puberty, hormones are crazy. Like, you're kind of crazy when you're 12 in a way. Like, just taking out any question of underlying mental illness or anything like that. Like, you're not your most reasonable as a 12, 13-year-old person.
That's also a bad position to put the jury in, because these girls definitely are guilty of attempted murder.
Yes. But the question
yeah.
is how much you understand they were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Or how much do you want to, who does it serve to put them in prison forever?
And the max punishment, So Morgan was eventually diagnosed by court psychiatrist Kenneth Casimir with schizophrenia and oppositional defiant disorder. For schizophrenia, Casimir said the patients could lose track of reality in a number of ways: hallucinations, hearing voices, and delusional thought, like believing Slender Man is real. During the trial, another psychologist stated that he felt Anissa was susceptible to delusional disorder, schizotypal personality disorder. And this particularly is a diminished ability to determine what is real and what is not real. He also felt that she had no characteristics of psychopathy or sociopathy, but she was diagnosed with a shared psychotic disorder with Morgan. We talked about this in our show. It's like a folie à deux, madness of two, where you kind of share delusions so deeply, you egg each other on so much that you enter into a psychosis with another person, and that the fact that it's with another person makes it stronger because you're going back and forth. It's an endless feedback loop of this really damaging thought.
It's what's probably going on with Betty and Barney Hill, or those two ladies who say they went back in time at Versailles.
Yes. You say, oh, isn't this weird? Isn't this weird? Isn't this weird? And then it just goes back and forth.
You know what? You're right. That was Marie Antoinette.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
And so this idea of this hysteria and shared madness is really prevalent in a lot of stories that both of our podcasts cover. Hysteria is often a factor in what leads to witch trials and the scapegoating of those perceived as others. And this event really was evocative to me of the Salem witch trials. Now, of course, it's the one that I know the best, but the fact of the young girls being the catalyst here, they're influenced by a variety of factors that are still debated even to today. It wasn't ergot. But they include societal pressures, paranoia, in their cases, the real difficulties of colonial living and being a young girl in the pre-revolutionary era, and just the dreadful boredom. You don't have much to do from childhood to getting married. You're just getting ready to get married a lot of the time. You're helping your mom. You're helping around the house. And
Lots
then
of socks to darn.
You're waiting to be a wife and a mother. And that was a really lonely and difficult place to be, I'm sure, as a young woman in the colonial era. So that sort of, in the Salem witch trials case, they had these shared stories that they would go back and forth and participate in. There was a role play element of making their little puppets and doing little spells and things. Yeah, and they whipped each other into a frenzy building on each other's stories until it did leak out into the real world and had really large implications for their society with adults as well. So it wasn't just limited to the children. And that's how the shared storytelling of the Slender Man in this little group led to those real life consequences. It's this shared hysteria that leads to tragedy.
I think those girls probably were feeling their power.
Yes, I think so.
And like the Salem witch trial afflictions, that was full of emotion. The shared delusion of Anissa and Morgan, I wonder how it seems like there was like this void of emotion.
Yeah, and some of that could be their particular individual mental states and mental health struggles. Morgan might just have a very flat affect generally.
I think part of it is also what they were doing was so involved in this other being, doing things for this other being or through this other being. They could kind of lay blame for this other being. And I think they probably knew they were doing something wrong, depending on the mental illness factor, but they knew that killing was wrong.
She said, "I'm sorry."
Yes.
Yeah.
But the girls in the witch trials, I think initially they probably didn't understand what they were doing was wrong. Eventually, things escalated to such an extent that it was like, oh, people are dying. This is getting serious. But I think they had the fantasy. They thought they were in the right. They thought they were doing what was right in a way. I think
They put a baby in prison pretty early.
they did. I think by that point they were probably figuring it out. But initially, and again, they have childlike motivations too. They don't want to get in trouble. So they have to start blaming other people. And then eventually they're whipping each other into a frenzy of this is really happening. And then they have to keep the ruse going because, again, they could get in trouble. Like it's a very childlike thing, but has these really drastic implications in the lives of so many people. And that's what happened in the Slender Man stabbing as well.
You can see how the girls in the Salem witch trials, and it seems like these two girls, the Slender Man case, like they're really influenced by what adults are saying also, because adults invented Slender Man and adults in Salem were saying, hey, the devil's all around you. He's walking around these woods right now trying to get people. So, they're on heightened alert, believing what the adults say. And then the adults are reinforcing them and saying, okay, good job accusing that person. Why don't you accuse another? We're going to have that person arrested. We're validating your accusation. So
exactly.
felt
If your
feedback.
mom's telling you the devil's real and you don't have a lot of outside experience in the world to tell you that it's not real, you're going to believe that it's real. And if your mom is telling you, I don't want you looking at that Slender Man stuff anymore, it's not right, then part of you as a child might think maybe there is something like, why is my mom afraid of him if he's not real? Why doesn't she want me looking at this? It is eventually like they are two stories told by adults to children, and the children take it and really run with it for different reasons. But it's interesting that they're the young women and feeling, I think probably both of them did feel powerless. I think any 12-year-old girl kind of feels powerless in a way of the changes going on around her with her friend groups, with her microcosm of society, with her body, things that where you're not understanding how you're feeling from moment to moment. Sometimes you feel powerless. So you can either take action in the Salem witch trials case, or you could be a proxy to another being and not have to make these decisions for yourself.
I was just thinking one of my favorite, it's more than a character because she's a real person, but Abigail Hobbs, she had the most wild confession about her contract with the devil. And I was just thinking, man, how would have Abigail Hobbs, what would have she had to say about Slender Man? What actions would she have taken with Slender Man?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think any of those obviously those are all coerced confessions to one degree or another in witch trials. Do you think people get into, and do you think any of those people got into a place where they were just like ended up in the delusion with everybody else? Or is it always a case of please stop hitting me? I saw
I'll tell you
I
whatever
put
you want to
I
know.
wrote in the book.
Well, I mean, Josh, what do you think about Abigail in Slender Man?
I think Abigail Hobbs, she confessed, I think, because she wanted to. She's like an outlier. She's a 15-year-old girl who's like the wild child of Topsfield, Massachusetts.
Oh yes, I
She
remember her. Yeah.
like has a lot of squabbles with her stepmom, and she like she's has the habit of telling people before the witch trials, like, oh, I know the devil. He'll come if I call him. Things like that, that you shouldn't be saying at any time in 17th century Massachusetts. But I think that she was like, yeah, I know the devil. What of it? And she felt she had a certain cachet
Exactly.
because of it. By the way, I know
Oh.
you have the trial of George Jacobs up on your wall there.
We
I can see
do,
him
yeah.
kneeling.
So we have, so my parents had, my dad's an English teacher, and growing up, we had the famous portrait of Nathaniel Hawthorne over our fireplace from, we got it at the House of Seven Gables. He was, my dad was a big fan. And so when we moved in here, he gave it to us, and we were like, it was kind of, I really like these paintings. And I think it's just, I don't know. I like it.
We've themed this dining room around Salem, Massachusetts. We
Which
have
is
the witch
interesting.
house on
Yeah.
one wall. We have Hawthorne there, and we have
I
we have
always
this and
think
its companion piece. Actually, those two big witch trials paintings.
they're such, and again, it's the witch hunt, the witch trials that I'm most familiar with, and most people are, but it is one of my particular interests. And I think something about the reminder of what we can do to each other when we're not civil, when we don't talk, when we don't try to understand each other. And these are things that I really value, is like civil discourse, empathy, trying to understand each other. That's really important to me. So that's why I like the reminders of, in a weird way, it reminds me of my own like moral hierarchy, I guess.
And the importance of critical thinking.
Yes, critical thinking, very important now, maybe more than ever, but certainly then too.
Yeah, definitely. When you're confronted with some of these ideas, like that your neighbor is a witch, you should stop and think for a minute on
Yeah.
that. Like, could there be another explanation to why my butter soured or why my pudding split down the middle? Which are things that happen
You
in
say
witch
that,
trials.
Josh. You say that, but she looked through the window right when I took the sip of the sour milk. So if you were here, I think you would agree with me.
But they were in such a reduced experience of the world, like children. All they had was their religion. All they knew, most of them, was the local area, their neighbors, their hometown. Some of them had been in nearby states and had gone through traumas with Indian wars and things like that. But all they knew was their very, comparatively to nowadays, they didn't have the internet, right? But they're smaller realities. They're very insulated communities. And in the Slender Man stabbing, it is like a very insulated situation. There is this connectivity to the internet and stuff, but the access ends up just making them more and more obsessed with this one thing and feeding into it on each other. And they don't have the life experience of an adult. They haven't traveled, they haven't met a lot of people. So it's easier to believe certain things when you don't have the experience not to.
Also, when you're forming a personality, when you're a adolescent, a teenager, even I would say this applies through college and for some people through their 20s, you are looking for things to build that personality around. And sometimes you can become obsessive about something just because you haven't figured out what else you're really about yet. You're trying to find the thing. And I think it's harder for some people than for others. But they must have been talking a lot about Slender Man, because when Peyton heard the reasoning behind the stabbing, she was just like, that makes sense.
Yeah, they would do that, basically. I know they were obsessed. I wasn't really into it, but yeah, that makes sense to me why they would think that's a good thing to do. So yeah, so at the end of the day, Nisa pled guilty. And the jury found her guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. So, not insanity, but she's not fully in charge of her faculties. Morgan accepted a plea deal wherein she would not go to trial and would leave it up to psychiatrists how long that she would be held in a mental hospital. And then later she pled guilty, but was found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Anissa received 25 years to life. She had a few years of locked confinement and involuntary treatment at the State Psychiatric Institute. Morgan received the maximum sentence of 40 years to life. She was in 3 years of locked confinement and involuntary treatment at the Psychiatric Institute. And then eventually Anissa was released in 2021, and Morgan continues to live in a state mental facility.
I think it's good that they weren't sent to prison forever. I don't think that would serve anybody. But I think I don't, usually the standards for the insanity defense, as it's called,
Is whether you know right from wrong.
is whether you know right from wrong. And if you apologize to your victim before you stab them, I think you are blowing that defense out of the water. But I also think they probably just shouldn't have been tried as adults because they were children. So.
Both before and after.
It makes me feel frustrated with the adults. It's like, are we too lazy to learn how to try children for horrific crimes? Let's just follow this template over here because it's so bad. Well, they got help. The help that was available. I can't even, like you mentioned, what it would have been like for the jury when you're thinking about the judge, but even the medical staff who wanted to see these girls heal and be okay. I can't imagine what that journey was like for everybody. But I don't know. Adult trials for children, it just seems like, can we do better than that? But also it was she almost died. She could have been dead and she survived. That survival is incredible.
Which is Yeah. And so it seems apparent that Morgan and Anissa latched onto this outsider monster because they themselves felt like outsiders and then fed into each other's delusions until they enacted this crime in his name. The real question here, and I think we're probably like-minded of this, but does that make them monsters? This monstrous act, planning this monstrous act? Can 12-year-olds be monsters? Are they capable of that? Are children capable of that? Their brain isn't fully developed. Maybe they're not totally understanding everything they're doing, but can you still be a monster as a child? What about the mental health factor? And then this applies to many people we've talked about, many criminals and stuff, and not to say anything about mental illness. There are factors in a lot of crimes where that is a contribution. Can you be fully a monster if you're not fully in charge of your mind? Many of us would probably, I hope, say that only a monster could coldly stab their best friend and leave them for dead. But can these girls really be defined as that?
They are they've had years of help. One of them's free out in the world.
Now, but were they monsters when they did this crime? It was a monstrous action, but can you define them as monsters?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it reminds me going back again to Salem because I love it so much, even though it was awful.
Yeah, exactly.
People like to blame the girls for the accusations that they made, but there were Ann Putnam Jr. was 12 years old, Abigail Williams, 11 years old. How much responsibility could they possibly bear if you were going to try them for, say, false accusations or something? How much responsibility can they actually bear because of where they are in their mental development?
Exactly. And the adults are the ones giving them the power. If the adults weren't listening to them, the adults weren't making the arrests. It wasn't the girls who were doing the hangings or whatever. It was the adults that gave them the power. So at the end of the day, they were the ones that kind of helped it happen.
Yeah, do you know, with the three friends in Wisconsin, was it common for them to be out on their own, wandering? Because I know that that's an age, right, where I was. at that age out in the neighborhood.
100%.
But I don't know. You hate to think that they left the house with a weapon. It just is wild to me that they left the house with a weapon.
I think the initial thing was that they were going to the park. And that's something we would have a slumber party and then we'd walk over to the park and sit on the swings or whatever, just hang out for like 2 hours for doing nothing. I think that was probably what they assumed and what they usually did. And then like when Peyton's being brought further and further into the woods, like even she's understanding this is strange. So I don't think that was something that was expected of like, oh, they're going to go to the national park. They're going to go into like deep into the woods. And I think the girls didn't really know what they were doing either because they thought that there was like a mansion in there. Yeah, I think they probably were just going to the park and they took advantage of that trust that their parents put in them. They're like, oh, they've gone to the park 1,000 times and this will be like any other time. You're not going to expect that someone's going to get stabbed by one of the girls,
Yeah. The question on monsters and were they monsters at that point and just at what point is a human a monster? And there is so much that plays into bad choices as we've learned about these attackers. There were things that weren't okay within their own minds. But do we need to admit that humanity is capable, that people are just very capable of monstrous acts? Is that important? Or is there just like you hit this limit and now you're not a human, you're a monster? Are you a human acting like a monster?
Yeah, it's interesting because even in certain other cases, like John Wayne Gacy, right, a famous serial killer, probably widely considered a monster, very famously had very abused and had traumatic brain injury, head trauma, which is another common thing. And I say that as someone who got a really severe concussion playing hockey. So I'm not saying every person with head injuries is a murderer.
She has no victims that we know of.
Yes. But that is a common factor. And there is a nature versus nurture aspect. A lot of these people, obviously, John Wayne Gacy was dealing with a lot of mental trauma from his upbringing and brain trauma. But I think most of us would say that guy was a monster. Is that because he was an adult when he made those decisions? Is that the factor? Do we assign more innocence logically to a 12-year-old?
I think when it comes to serial murderers and when it comes to Gacy's and Bundy's, I think
the repetition of it.
No, I think we want to define them as monsters as a way to other them and put up a wall between, but not me. It could never be, I would never do anything like that, obviously, because I'm a totally different species than that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. Yeah. Like, why do we call people monsters? It's because we don't want to think about, are we capable of doing the things that they're doing? We want to be so different from them. And we want an easy explanation too. We don't want to think about, well, he had some head trauma and some other trauma in his life. And, that contributed. And then, this and that.
There have been a couple of like scary sniper guys, but one of them had just a brain tumor and a note on his body that said, I think there's something going on in my head. Please cut it open. And there was a big old tumor pressing on his brain. It's really scary to think that just something physically going on could turn you into a monster.
And at the end of the day, the girls that perpetrated this crime, they thought they were doing this for this faceless, inhuman creature. But Peyton only saw her very human friends at the end of the knife.
Wow.
And she didn't see a faceless, non-human monster. She saw two girls that she grew up with, that she trusted. What would she define as monstrous? Would she blame Slender Man, or would she blame the very human girls that chose to do this to her? Probably the girls. So yeah, it's a very interesting question of what defines a monster, what defines othering. And I think we both found in our shows and the different cases we've investigated that there's a lot of factors, and it changes from story to story, and even sometimes within a story. Maybe these girls did a monstrous action, but then there was later context found to those actions, and that sort of informs on what happened previously, and the definitions change. So
Yeah, that holding these perpetrators at arm's length or othering them, or breaking down those barriers a little bit to explore what's going on under the hood, is all very of a piece of that true crime world that we sometimes swim into. I think that is the fascination of serial killer stories for true crime people. It's like,
we're all people, but how could they be like me?
Him like me?
Yeah.
Him like me how? You know, that's the dread of serial killers, I think, for a lot of people.
So that's the Slender Man stabbing, and that's the story of Slender Man and how internet folklore kind of turned into this real life horror story. And I think we've seen that conspiracies and things like that in their own way, kind of internet folklore nowadays, have also continued doing a lot of the same things. So yeah, it's really about that critical thinking. It can be hard if you have other factors at play, sort of messing with how you are thinking.
Has his suit gotten more suity over the years? I feel like the tie is more defined now.
He definitely has a tie. Sometimes there's like sexy Slender Man too.
Yeah, that one's built. We just found a pretty built Slender.
Like, but he's not that slender. I mean,
His chest, yeah, he shouldn't look like he's ripping out bench press.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's
So
something.
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys. This has been
This is
a
great.
blast.
Yeah, this was
I feel like I'm
awesome.
shaking off
The best of
Hey.
it.
Good job.
Hey.
And the cobwebs just in time for October.
Yeah, I'll come in other parts of the house.
I'll hit stop.
Thanks for having us, and have an amazing spooky season. And yeah, don't let Slender Man get you. I guess.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to our next collab, guys. Please invite us back, and maybe we can get you into the Ain't It Scary studio sooner rather than later.
That would be really fun. And I have to tell you, I was like, you could tell Josh this week, I was like, I hope they bring up Men in Black. I hope they bring up Men in Black. I hope I can get him to sing. What if I can get him to sing it?
That wasn't even in
I'm
my
sorry,
notes.
I'm so embarrassed. I was running
Oh.
down Will Smith in my head.
It's
Oh.
like wild, wild.
Yeah.
Surprised you didn't get jiggy with it.
Yeah, no, I really have just enjoyed your episodes so much.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you. We have loved watching your show grow.
And develop, and the scope develop, and also how you guys have helped influence the sort of real world outside of podcast stuff. I think that's really
Oh,
important. And again, influencing more critical thought and interest in history, and knowing how history informs what we're doing now. I think that's more important now than ever.
And sometimes how some of this stuff isn't fully left in the past.
No,
And
it's just a lot of the times it just recycles and repeats, and hopefully we can approach it in a more critical and tempered way. That's not always the name of the game nowadays, unfortunately.
Yeah.
we can probably start by not calling people monsters.
That's true.
Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow.